Good morning, government students. Today we're doing notes 4.2, Civil Liberties, Protecting Individual Rights. Your essential question, how does federalism affect individual rights? So today we're going to be reflecting back on the Constitution about our civil rights that are given to us, our civil liberties that we have protections against, and our civil rights that have been given to us by the government. So remember, those first 10 amendments to the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. The 13th and 14th Amendments have also given us personal freedoms. In general, civil liberties, which we're talking about today, are protections against the government. These are guarantees of the safety of persons, opinions, and property from arbitrary acts of government. Civil rights is what we're going to learn about next time. These are positive acts that the government has taken that seek to make constitutional guarantees a reality for all people. The process of limited government was established with our Constitution, so we have 3 different branches of government to separate the powers. People in the United States are free to do as they please as long as they don't infringe upon the rights of others. Sometimes rights can conflict with each other, and that is what the judicial branch is supposed to determine. So the 14th Amendment to the Constitution says that no state can deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. The Supreme Court has had to define the rights on a case-by-case basis, and this is called the process of incorporation. The Ninth Amendment to the Constitution is pretty vague, and it was intended to be so. So the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution is the enumeration of certain rights that shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So the American people possess rights that are not set out explicitly in the Constitution. So this is vague, so it's been used to protect rights such as the rights of the accused or the rights of women to have an abortion. The First Amendment gave us many different things, but the freedom of religion. So first, the freedom of religion means that we have the freedom from religion. So we have the ability to prevent the government from establishing any national religion. And then we also have the free exercise clause, which says that we have the freedom for religion, meaning we have the freedom to practice any religion that we'd like. There's supposed to be a separation of church and state in our government. So our church and state is supposed to establish, our separation of church and state is supposed to establish a distinction between the government and the churches. Okay, so we're supposed to have a wall of separation, but it doesn't always happen. The government supports churches in ways like tax exemption statuses. So although we have mega churches in the United States that bring in lots of money, they don't have to pay any taxes to the government. Religion is involved in education as well, so we have exemptions like you are allowed to leave school with an excused absence if you need to take care of like religious classes. We are not allowed to have religion in the schools as far as what our teachers can teach. Teachers can't have any sort of religious text be used in the classroom, so we can't just pull out a Bible and start reading that together. But you are allowed to do that in individual student groups. So if you wanted to form a religious club on school campus, you could do that. And then during your own free time, you could meet and practice your religion. Private religious schools are also funded by the government, but they have to pass what we call the Lemon Test, and this is named after the court case in 1971. So the government can provide money to private religious schools, but that aid cannot be used for any religious classes. So it can go to their standard classes, their government classes, their US history, math, English, but it can't go to any Bible study or religious classes. The Supreme Court has still worked on, or still determined religion in terms of holiday displays. So you can't have a specific holiday display that is only for one religion, but you can have it if it has multiple religions represented. So, like if you're doing a seasonal winter display, you can have a Christmas tree, but you also should have a menorah. It can't just be one exclusive holiday. There are limits on your free exercise clause as well, of course. So, actions that violate social duties or disrupt social order are not covered by the free exercise clause. For example, bigamy, the use of poisonous snakes during religious ceremonies. So, bigamy is the practice of being married to more than one person. Usually, in a religious context, this is one man married to multiple wives. Or some churches use poisonous snakes as part of their services. They hold them, and then if you are protected by the Lord, you don't get bitten by the snakes, but that has been seen to be dangerous. Some of the limits as well, school children who have not been vaccinated are not allowed to go to public schools. So here in California, you all have been vaccinated, which is why you're in our school, but some religions prevent you from getting vaccines, and that's fine, but then you cannot go to a public school. You have to go to a private school or be homeschooled. We also have freedom of the speech under the First Amendment that does protect your free expression, written, communicated, in any other way. So if you want to write it down, if you want to post it online, that's fine. But it does not protect against libel and slander. Libel is the false use of written words, and slander is false spoken words. So you obviously can't do that. Words that incite others to commit crimes are not protected under the First Amendment, nor is being obscene. So, obscenity laws have changed over time. We do have the freedom of speech, but really, what is considered obscene is up to you individually, up to different people. So, it's been a hard one to establish. Sedition is the crime of attempting to overthrow the government by force. So, over US history, we've had various different things considered to be seditious speech. The most strict, probably in 1917, we said that even if you insult the president, the flag, the uniform of the military, that was considered seditious speech. So, that has also changed over time as well. Obscenity laws. The obscenity test was laid out in Miller v. California in 1973. This is generally what the average person would find to be obscene. That's what the standard that they use in obscenity cases. Now that has changed over time. So Lenny Bruce was a comedian in the 50s. He was charged for obscenity for making inappropriate jokes, which obviously, if you think about our comedians nowadays, that probably would not happen. We also cannot limit freedom of speech until it's been spoken. So the government has tried to limit freedom of speech in our newspapers, like the Pentagon Papers with the New York Times during the Vietnam War. But the Supreme Court has ruled that it cannot be limited until the speech has actually happened. There's also limits on the media. Motion pictures, movies have to have ratings. Radio and TV also have to be limited because those are transmitted through public airways. So we do have limits on those freedom of speeches as well. Symbolic speech is still considered speech. This is speech that is expressed by conduct, such as picketing, striking, protesting. Those are all symbolic speeches. Unfortunately, this does not cover the burning of draft cards, which we learned during the Vietnam War, but it does cover the burning of flags. So all of that is considered symbolic speech. Commercial speech is for advertisements for businesses. So we are not allowed to have false advertisements or misleading advertisements. And then they can limit, different states have limits on the advertisements of alcohol and tobacco. Our First Amendment also provides us the freedom of assembly and petition. The Constitution guarantees the freedom of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government with a redress of grievances. So you are allowed to assemble with organizations to express your views. So you can assemble in the form of a protest. You can organize with different groups as well. The government can make rules regarding the place, time, and manner of assemblies. So the government can tell you that if you want to have a march in the street, you have to get a permit so that they can block off the streets and make sure that everything is going to be safe for the people. So they can enforce the times. They can limit you until 9 o'clock at night because they don't want things to be too loud overnight, things like that. So they can require that you have a license to hold a parade or a march on the street. Public property is also not covered by this, so we do have to protect individuals' public property. And we have also had cases that have created buffer zones around abortion clinics because we're having people um, go right up to the doors of abortion clinics to protest them. We were also having people use bombs inside of abortion clinics, and they were killing the nurses and doctors that worked inside. So there is a documentary on this called Reversing Roe. Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court case that legalized abortion in 1973. That is an extra credit opportunity if you were interested. You do have your freedom to assemble, you have your freedom to protest, but you are not allowed to trespass on private property. You can also associate with different groups that promote your causes, such as the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, or the NRA, the National Rifle Association. You can organize with groups that share like interests. So due process is guaranteed by the 5th and 14th Amendment. The government cannot deny any person without life, liberty, or property without due process. And that is the 5th Amendment, but the 14th Amendment makes sure that we know that the states and local governments can also not do that without due process. So due process means that the government must act fairly and in accord with established rules at all times. So due process can be broken down into two different branches. Substantive due process, the fairness of the law itself, is the law fair to everyone, and procedural due process, the fairness of the procedures used to enforce the laws. Are laws being enforced the same for every person? Now, the police are used to enforce many of these laws, and the police have been up for a lot of debate recently because the police are supposed to promote health, safety, morals, and the general welfare. But that is different based on every single different police force that we have. States have different regulations, different counties have different regulations on what their police are supposed to be doing. So there's a lot of debate on what the role of the police should be in our society and whether the police are being asked to do maybe too many things. So maybe we should defund part of the police is the current debate, and that money should go into more things like mental health care. We have the right to privacy. This was established in Griswold v. Connecticut in 1965. Which held that outlawing birth control was unconstitutional. So we actually used to, in the 60s, outlaw birth control in the United States. And then we legalized it, but you had to get your husband's consent to be able to get birth control. So that has been fought over and over again in the courts. We also have the right to the right to be free, except in very limited circumstances, from unwanted governmental intrusion into one's privacy. So privacy has been used also in the abortion debate. So the women's right to an abortion in Roe v. Wade 1973 has also been argued that it is our right to privacy to have an abortion. But a lot of people disagree with that. Freedom and the security of the person was established by the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This ended slavery and involuntary servitude, except in terms of punishment for a crime. So we know that slavery never really ended. It just kind of changed because we have the except here in this amendment, except in terms of punishment for a crime. The Second Amendment provides us the right to keep and bear arms in the United States. Okay, so that is the right for each state to form and keep a militia so people can have their own weapons and they can fight back against the government when they think it is being unjust. The Supreme Court has limited what kinds of weapons people are allowed to have, so they have forbidden sawed-off shotguns, sorry, that's hard to say, silencers, and matching machine guns, across state lines without informing and paying a tax. Security and home of a person. The security and home of persons. The Third and Fourth Amendments protect the security of a home and a person. So the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizures. It's also extended through the 14th Amendment. And the Fourth Amendment means that they can't be illegal search and seizures. So elements of this are probable cause. So if you get pulled over in an automobile, police don't always need a warrant to search your automobile. They can have probable cause. For instance, if you get pulled over and you smell like alcohol or marijuana, they can have probable cause to search your vehicle. We have arrest under this as well. So to arrest a person, an officer needs probable cause that they committed a crime. We also, since 2001, we have had wiretapping. So police officers needed a warrant to wiretap, but that has been up for debate under the Patriot Act because a lot of phones were being wiretapped by the government to prevent terrorism. For the right of the accused, if you have been accused of a crime, so we have the right of habeas corpus, which prevents unjust arrest and imprisonment. You have the right to a speedy and public trial. Okay, so the beginning of a person's federal criminal trial must take place no more than 100 days after they are arrested. A judge can limit who can watch a trial if the defendant's rights are in jeopardy. So the O.J. Simpson trial was the first public trial in the United States that was actually recorded and played on TV. And you also have the right to a trial by jury. All Americans are guaranteed an impartial jury chosen from the district in which the crime was committed. So that means if you were arrested in Yolo County, you would have a jury that is also from Yolo County. Some of the rights, if you've been accused of crime, you have the right to be informed of the accusation against you. You have the right to be confronted with the witnesses who are saying that you committed these crimes. You can subpoena witnesses to testify on your behalf, and you can have a lawyer to speak in your defense. You also have the right to protect yourself against self-incrimination. You cannot be forced to confess to a crime. A husband or wife cannot be forced to testify against their spouse. And in Miranda versus Arizona in 1966, they established the Miranda rules. So if any of you have ever watched any of those police officer shows, your Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say or do will be used against you in a court of law. Those are your Miranda rights. So if you do get arrested and they do not read you your Miranda rights, then the whole case can be thrown out. Punishment and bail. I believe this is our last slide. Oh, almost our last slide. Sorry. Punishment and bail. So bail is the sum of money that the accused may be required to deposit with the court as guarantee that you will appear in court. So if you're arrested for a crime, they can say that if you give them $10,000 in bail money, you can get out until your court date. And then that way you will make sure that you appear once you go back to court on that day. The amount of bail is not supposed to be excessive, but I would argue that the amounts of bail are excessive for most people. And the Eighth Amendment protects us against cruel and unusual punishment. So they cannot do things like barbaric torturing of people. They have argued that people cannot be denied medical care while they are incarcerated as well, because that is considered cruel and unusual punishment. And then capital punishment has been argued whether it is cruel and unusual punishment or not. So the Eighth Amendment, remember, does protect us against cruel and unusual punishment. So should the death penalty be part of our legal system, is that cruel and unusual? Different courts have debated different things. So different states have different laws regarding this. In California, we no longer have the death penalty. We consider it to be cruel and unusual punishment, but not all states do. NPR actually just did a story about this week, and they said most people who are put to death, they're put to death by lethal injection. But for most people, it feels like they are drowning while they're quickly dying to death. Dying to death. All right, and treason. Treason is the only crime that is defined in the Constitution. So treason is levying war against the United States. or giving aid and comfort to enemies of the United States. John Brown was hanged for this because he did a raid on Harper's Ferry where he was gathering African Americans and white Americans and having them all fight back against slavery. And so this was considered to be treasonous at the time, way back in the mid 1800s. And so he was killed for this. But yes, treason, only a person can commit this crime during a time of war, and it is punishable by the death penalty. And that is the end of your notes for today, so don't forget to write a summary, a couple sentences about what you learned.